Good evening and welcome to this edition of Resource PNG. Tonight we showcase two reports, one on mining and the environment and the other a PNG LNG update. Also on the show is an interview with Peter Graham, the Managing Director for Esso Highlands Limited, and the Minister for Treasury, Honourable Don Paulier. But first we take a look at this report on mining and the environment. The environmental impacts of mining have been a contentious issue in Papua New Guinea, given the experience of Panguna and Oktedi mines. Today, many of these environmental impacts are minimized as a result of well-designed, well-operated and well-regulated mining operations. Sir Peter Bata was regional member for Madang when discussion began for the construction of the Ramu mine. He highlights the difficulties politicians, policymakers and landowners go through when placed with the promise of development and the cost to the environment.
At the time I was really responsible as the regional member of Madang, and I didn't want the project to go ahead that could backfire. And whilst there were immediate advantages in the economic development of the Rai Coast, I always kept thinking of what's going to happen behind, and I'm not around, and if anything goes wrong, who's going to get the blame for this? And I'll go back through the history books and look at who was the regional member at the time, and perhaps the blame could be passed on to me. So I've always been very sensitive to this. And in fact, you know, even though some of the NGOs perhaps didn't like me very much, I had to balance these things up, and I think that any mining in any developing country is a matter of a balance between environment and development. And if you can't have economic development, or you can't have an economy, you really can't have a development.
Indeed, the word balance is open to interpretation in the context of PNG's resources sector. Finding the right balance can be tricky with conflicting demands and expectations of various stakeholders. The industry, however, complies with various Papua New Guinean government environmental regulations. In addition, numerous efforts have been made towards improving mine waste management and reducing environmental impacts. Following the advent of environmental issues affecting the Fly River, Oktedi Mining Limited has instituted a dredging program to remove sediment from the river and a mine waste tailings program to remove acid-forming pyrite and heavy metals from mine tailings.
Essentially, the work that we conduct here at BIGE is to mitigate two environmental impacts that the Oktedi's operation has on the environment. The first is river reclamation and storage on top of stockpiles in order for us to be able to minimize the river aggradation. The other is storage of pyrite corn in subaqueous pits for us to be able to minimize the effects of high sulfur in the river system.
Oktedi Mine Limited also monitors the Fly River to ensure that mining activities have a minimal impact on land and river ecology. OTML's environmental management systems ensure that water quality meets national and international guidelines. Traditional resources are available for people and the river is navigable.
And we have got three scientific programs that looks at the aquatic and terrestrial ecology, in terms of looking at resources availability and edibility of those resources. And we also look at the water quality of the Oktedi Fly River system. And we look at the sediment transport, deposition, reactivity, and interaction with sediment with water, and water interaction with the biology, like fish, for example.
Similarly, at Barracks Pogera Mine, over 20 years of monitoring data that indicate that foods sourced from waterways downstream of the mine are safe to eat.
We normally target the aquatic life, so that's mainly the fish and the prawns, which starts at about 40 kilometers from the mine site. That's where the Lagai River is, and then all the way down to the Strickland. So Over the 20-year mine life that we have done our monitoring, the results have shown that there hasn't been any significant increase against the World Health Food Standards. So the fish and prawns in the river systems are safe to eat.
To maintain this natural balance, wastes from mining operations at Porgera are stored in landfills and the land rehabilitated.
We are at K62 dump on the Kogai stable dump, and this area you see the trees and grasses were planted 10 years back. One of the government permit conditions is to revegetate the reclaimed areas.
At the Ramo nickel mine, laterite or eroded soil is being mined, unlike rock mining that occurs at Porgera and Oktedi. Environmental management systems are therefore tailored to minimize environmental impacts on the Ramo River.
It's not like other mining. We just mine the soil. It's not the rocks, it's only the soil. So sedimentation and erosion will be one of our major concerns. But we have control plans in place to minimize impacts of sediments being overflown into creeks and river systems. So our plans are shown the sediment settling ponds there. They have a very important role in controlling the sediments.
According to international environmental experts, the deep-sea tailings placement system was the only environmentally sound method of waste disposal for the Ramo mine since the mountainous Madang province is high in volcanic, earthquake and rainfall activity. The DSTP involves the removal of material leftover or waste after valuable minerals have been separated from mineral ore, which are deposited into the Bazamuk Bay. At this stage of commissioning of the Ramo mine, environmental monitoring indicates that there has been minimal impact on biological resources.
So the barren slurry material is processed in our tailings circuit where we neutralise it with lime to around pH 8.5 to 9. It's then mixed with seawater and then pumped approximately 150 metres underground into the Bismarck Sea.
When the discharge from the deep sea tailings was only a minute fraction of what was coming down the rivers, and most of the stuff coming down the rivers was sediment that could have done an enormous amount of damage to the environment. It probably is doing a lot more damage to the environment than the tailings. I had to be convinced of this. It didn't happen immediately, it happened over a couple of years.
This is the best way, DSTP is the best way to dispose the tailing.
Employing world-class scientific waste management and monitoring systems with close community consultations has improved relations between the industry and various local stakeholders. At Oktedi, mine-associated communities along the Okmani, Waitree and Fly rivers have enthusiastically supported the extension of mine life beyond 2015. The economic benefits that flow into national coffers and local communities have far outweighed the environmental impacts. We'll be back with more after the break. In preparation for production, the PNG LNG project is on target for first exports of gas by the end of 2014, with the project reaching 80% of completion with the construction phase at some of the sites. This means that some of the 20,270 workforce will be made redundant. In this next report, we see how the PNG LNG project has undertaken social and environmental projects in line with their national content plan that focuses on workforce development, facilitating business development for landowner companies, and community engagement.
The recently released PNG LNG Social and Environment Report for the first quarter of 2013 showed that the construction of the project is over 80% complete and on target for first exports of gas by the end of 2014. Completion of construction at some sites has meant that there has been a slight reduction in the LNG workforce as workers are made redundant upon project completion. In the first quarter of 2013, the project employed 20,270 people. Of the total project workforce, 66% are assigned to roles within the Heights Gas Conditioning Plant and LNG plant site near Port Moresby. As part of its National Content Plan, the project operator has embarked on workforce development and supplier development. In terms of workforce development, in February, the 5th intake of trainees graduated from the Juni Construction Training Facility, while the 6th intake of 20 new students began their training. The Juni Construction Training Facility provides programs that are Australian Quality Training Framework certified. At the LNG plant site, 171 trainees graduated with Technical and Further Education TAFE Australia Awards this quarter. More than 1,000 Papua New Guinean trainees have attended their internationally recognized TAFE Certificate Level 1 or Statement of Attainment after completing a combination of classroom and on-the-job training. In preparation for the project's production phase, the second intake of operations and maintenance trainees began advanced skills training in Malaysia after graduating from the basic skills training program in Port Moresby during the quarter. The development of suppliers has been particularly focused on upskilling PNG businesses to be globally competitive. The PNG LNG project has set up the Institute of Banking and Business Management Enterprise Centre to facilitate training for PNG businesses. A major milestone was achieved in the first quarter of 2013, with 15,000 Papua New Guinean entrepreneurs benefiting from the Enterprise Centre's workshops, use of workstations, business meetings, or provision of information. The centre has also provided the equivalent of more than 7,100 training days and over 880 advisory and mentoring days to Papua New Guinean businesses. During this quarter, the project spent 227.6 million kina, which is equivalent to US dollars 106.4 million with landowner companies. This brings the total project spent to date with landowner companies to more than 1.7 billion kina, which is US dollars 790 million. Together, additional service providers and landowner company services brought the total in-country in kina spend to more than 8.2 billion kina, which is US dollars 3.8 billion for the project to date. To further facilitate businesses, more than 1,400 landowner companies and other Papua New Guinean businesses have registered with the PNG LNG-sponsored supplier database to date, with more than 70 people using the online dashboard during this quarter. The third component of the project's National Content Plan involves strategic community investments. A social development milestone was achieved this quarter with 1,000 participants successfully completing personal viability training. The project distributed approximately 16,000 seedlings of high-yielding crops specifically selected for their compatibility to Papua New Guinean environment. It also created 27 fact sheets in Pidgin and English to give farmers information about simple methods used to grow healthy crops. To support trade in villages, construction has started on a permanent community market facility in Como. To ensure that the project is environmentally sustainable, there have been many innovations in waste management and biodiversity protection. at the Hyde's waste management facility. The second of 2 landfill cells was completed. Further waste processing equipment, including the tire debeater, shredder, drum crusher, and weighbridge, was delivered to complete the processing facility. Commissioning of the high-temperature incinerator also commenced. The project also has a biodiversity offset mechanism that aims to work with local customary landowners to protect sensitive ecosystems as a means of making up for losses that are an inevitable part of project-related activities.
We join Peter Graham after the break. You're back with Resource PNG. In this next interview, we talk to Peter Graham, the Managing Director for Esso Highlands Limited. The PNG LNG project is well underway and positioned to deliver liquefied natural gas in the international market. When the PNG LNG project was considering supplier contracts, some main considerations were capacity issues, consistent delivery, and whether there was competitive pricing. The PNG LNG project has awarded 8 billion kina in contracts, 25% of which went to landowner companies. We find out what were the main challenges involved in the establishment of local business development for landowner companies, and how the IBBM Enterprise Centre played an integral role in facilitating opportunities and capacity building. In this interview, Mr. Graham also explains what approach the project would have taken differently in addressing local business preparedness prior to the project.
Peter Graham, thank you for joining us on Resource PNG.
My pleasure.
The LNG project, as we are speaking now, is 80% complete. We're looking at first gas exports by the end of next year and LNG revenues coming in by 2015 onwards. Just reflecting on where the project has come to at this stage, could you give us an overview of what you think might come next year and whether you're able to deliver the project and the issue of demobilization of workers as well?
Okay. In terms of the status of the project, you're correct in saying that we're in excess of 80% complete at this point in time. I mean, the offshore pipeline is complete. The onshore pipeline has gone past Kurubu in the oil fields and is currently heading towards Hydes today. The Hydes gas conditioning plant is well advanced. Como airfield is finished, and the Antonov is delivering the large components in there which are being moved towards Hydes to build the gas plant. The wells are being drilled with 2 rigs on Hydes Ridge, and the LNG plant itself is very well advanced. So in terms of being prepared for first cargo in 2014, we're well positioned at this point in time and very confident that we'll meet the expectations of our customers and lenders in meeting the targets that have been set.
When you were thinking about giving supplier contracts, that you were looking at capacity issues, whether they were able to deliver consistently, whether they had a competitive price.
Yes.
And in terms of these contracts that you've given out to Papua New Guinean-based companies, including Lancos, you've given 8 billion in contracts, and of that 1.2, about a quarter is Lancos. Could you discuss whether there was a potential for Lancos to be more actively involved and what the limitations were?
Really, the challenge for us and for the landowner companies is the pace of development. I mean, from the starting point, a project like this, a big project, needs to move quite quickly. And many of these companies simply didn't exist at the time the project started. So really getting companies established, for them to assemble the people, train their people, obtain finance, just put their management processes in place does take a significant period of time. So what we set out to do from the outset was to try and reserve certain businesses for the landowner companies, which we thought were realistic for them to participate in from the outset. Things like camp maintenance, camp catering, security, labour hire and ground transportation. And we encouraged the landowner companies to participate in those particular areas, and then if they had established competence in those areas, to broaden out and get involved in somewhat more complex businesses like civil works, road construction, participation in that type of activity. So, I mean, the major challenge, I think, is just having the capacity to respond to a fast-moving project.
And ExxonMobil has essentially responded to that capacity challenge by setting up the IBBM Enterprise Center.
Yes.
And just reflecting on where the Enterprise Center has come now, what are some successes that you've seen, and what are some lessons that Papua New Guinea can learn in terms of capacity building of native businesses?
I think the Enterprise Centre has done a wonderful job. It's exceeded our expectations in terms of being a resource centre, for the project, basically, and to help link the project to potential suppliers in Papua New Guinea. One of the challenges, the contractors who come in and subcontractors, many of whom are international companies, they don't know who's who in Papua New Guinea. And on the other side, the Papua New Guinean companies trying to find business don't know where to go to access the opportunities. So the Enterprise Centre did a great matching job. I mean, they provided the database, basically, where the contractors could say, I've got these opportunities, and suppliers on the other side could say, look, these are my capabilities. Then the Enterprise Centre helped match people up. And then in terms of supporting landowner companies to get developed, it was really about helping them introduce, I mean, the basics in many cases, the basic management processes. I mean, how to run a payroll. For companies that suddenly go from no employees to several thousand employees is no small feat, basically, for any company to deal with. So again, a combination of ourselves, our contractors, and the Enterprise Centre all working together to try and build those capabilities to participate in the project. What would we do differently in future if we were to rerun the project? I think trying to get information out to local suppliers early on, so that they can anticipate the opportunities that are coming and do some pre-work for themselves, basically, to get ready to take on the opportunities. I think that would have helped somewhat in the very early stages of the project.
More of this interview with Peter Graham after the break. The involvement of local businesses is one of the 3 pillars of the PNG LNG project's National Content Plan. We find out from Mr. Peter Graham what the project has delivered under this plan. During the production phase, employment numbers will decrease. We find out what options ExxonMobil has to demobilize PNG workers and the sort of future the company is helping them achieve. In this interview, Peter Graham tells us the legacy of the project's socio-economic impact going forward.
In terms of the involvement of local businesses, I suppose that's one of your pillars of your national content.
It is. Yes.
Could you just inform our viewers the contents of the national content plan and what you've achieved so far in terms of delivering on the national content plan?
Okay. Our national content plan has 3 pillars. I mean, one is supplier development, which is what we've just been talking about, developing businesses to participate in the project. Employee development or human resource development, workforce development if you like, employing people, developing their skills and capacities. And the third area is what we call strategic community investments, areas in the communities in which we're working where we choose to make investments in developing capacity within those communities. I look at workforce development to start with. The project's employed something like 9,000 Papua New Guineans. When we established our national content plan back in 2009, we anticipated about 3,500 Papua New Guineans would be employed on the project. So we far exceeded that target, and it's been good for everyone, I think. A massive investment in training and infrastructure to support the training, and a lot of skills that have been developed either for application in other projects or just back in the villages when people go back to their village. On the strategic community investment side, it's mostly been focused on education, women's empowerment, and just small community projects, working with local communities. We usually look for sweat equity, and not just putting cash into a community and saying, here's the money, spend it as you will. Our preference is to work with that community, have them participate in a project, and we grow together. So.
You talked about the 9,000 workers that you've employed. During production stage, obviously the numbers are going to come down to about 1,200 to 1,500 workers. What is ExxonMobil doing in terms of demobilizing all those Papua New Guinean workers? What options do they have, and what type of future are you helping them to achieve?
Okay, in anticipation of that phase down of opportunities in the construction phase of the project, we've trained thousands of Papua New Guineans, employees, and in many cases their spouses as well, in what we call a Bright Futures program, helping them recognise the skills and assets that they have to make a future for themselves after the project has finished construction. And that's been very well received, we found, with the employees and their families, that it just helps them recognise what they've got. Some accumulated cash from employment, some skills that are now marketable, some skills that they can use in the community, and just a recognition of those assets and how they can apply them in a different setting. So a lot of work there. We're doing what we can to try and help identify jobs in other industries in Papua New Guinea where employment opportunities might exist. And already a few employers have come forward and said, look, we recognise the work you put in training these people. Can you help connect us up? So again, a positive outcome in that setting as well.
As you've highlighted, Como Airfield has been already developed. I suppose the demobilization has already happened at Como. At the local level, because I'm assuming that there would have been local labor employed, was there resistance to demobilization once the project was over?
It wasn't something that was just dropped on people. I mean, we did everything that we could to prepare people for the fact that their employment was going to have an end, as every construction project does have. So as I said before, training in Bright Futures to help people get prepared, advance notice on what's coming and when the demobilisation would occur, and then just helping people back into the community with community projects. We do also hope that the government's investment development grants, infrastructure development grants, if we can get some of those projects moving forward and support the government agencies in progressing those projects, that can soak up some of the labour and use the skills in very productive fashion going forward. So.
Yeah, I'm going to just go back to the issue of business involvement and capacity issues. Just reflecting on PNG businesses, where do you think, given the experience they've had, their level of competitiveness compared to international competitors? Could you just give a reflection on that?
I mean, our experience has been that Papua New Guinean workers have been, one, just thirsty for training. They just love to acquire new skills, so there's that sort of motivation and energy to learn and acquire those skills. They've acquired the skills quickly, and they've been very well motivated workers and very skilled workers in the area in which they've been trained. So we've been very pleased with the way the Papua New Guinean workforce have responded overall to the opportunities that we've been able to present to them for employment and skills acquisition.
And of course, with the first shipment and the revenues coming in, the nation obviously is looking forward to that and is perhaps going to respond to that in whatever fashion it decides. From your observation of where Papua New Guinea was before the LNG project, now it is, and where it is headed, could you just give us some sort of picture of what you think the legacy of this project is going to be, the impact, socio-economic impact it's going to have on the country going forward?
Okay. I guess I'd think about that in perhaps a few terms. One is just, again, the capacity building, to think that there are 9,000 Papua New Guineans who've acquired vocational skills that are potentially applicable to a range of projects across the country for years to come. That's a real legacy, I think, for Papua New Guinea, and one that we're particularly proud of. And that will benefit the country for many, many years to come, the fact that those skilled people are available in the workforce. They may not get soaked up immediately, but they don't lose the skills either. They're there for application and when other opportunities arise. I think the fact that the project has such a large footprint and a lot of infrastructure has been developed around the project access generally, infrastructure generally is going to improve. And I think the investments that we've made and the investments that the government is proposing to make on the back of the revenues they obtain, I think will again benefit this nation incredibly in years to come.
An interview with the Minister for Treasury, Don Poilier. That's next. Stay tuned. The government has announced the current trade deficit of 1.2 billion kina. Revenues from resources have dropped because of the downturn in the global economy. And in this next interview, Minister for Treasury Don Poilier provides an outline of what's happening. The minister also clears misconceptions surrounding concerns of the tax review underway and its reception from the extractive industry.
Government has announced, you've announced at the moment that there is a current trade deficit of 1.2 billion kina. You've also announced that revenues from resources have dropped because of a downturn in the global economy. Could you give Papua New Guineans an outline of what's actually happening?
Well, what's happening is most of it is beyond our control in terms of the prices of commodities like gold and copper and even in oil. What's happened is in the extractive industry, the commodities, the prices have been declining because of the impact of very moderate turnaround in the U.S. economy and very, very slow improvement or a lack of improvement in the Eurozone economies. And as a result, you've seen the growth in emerging and developing countries like China, India, and other emerging markets have also moderated below than expected. So Papua New Guinea has been affected by all these economical challenges there. Now, what we need to do now is we've got to make sure, that's why I use the word prudent consolidation, because most of our earnings into the budget has been from the extractive industry. So what we need to do now is, like we've already done, create a robust, a non-mining sector. And I'm happy to inform the people of this country that our non-mining sector has done comparatively very well in growing. So you are seeing a growth of a balanced economy in Papua New Guinea. And I like to continue to grow the non-mining sector. So what you will see is when the extractive industry takes some time, the price takes some time to rebound back to the levels that we've seen in the last 5 years. We need to have the non-mining sector grow to keep activities in Papua New Guinea growing. And that's what's happening at the moment. That's what we're doing now, and we're on track on that.
There are some industry players who are concerned that, particularly from the mining and petroleum sector, that the government is targeting those sectors. Could you elaborate to Papua New Guineans what the context of the tax review is?
No, the government is not just polarizing its tax review on the petroleum and mining sector. That's a misconception or misperception by the public. And I like to give the assurance, like I did this morning, that the petroleum and mining sectors have undergone this review as the first sectors to be looked at by government, but in the holistic approach that we're taking. And because the International Monetary Fund have put out their hand to helping Papua New Guinea to meeting the cost for work to be done, studying the petroleum and mining, we've allowed them to assist us by starting work on the taxation review in those two sectors first. I have not even got the reports to me yet, because I want that review to continue to other areas of review. So it's a broader scale, holistic review approach taken by the O'Neill Dion government. It's not just the petroleum and mining.
There is also the public perception that the sector has been given too many tax holidays. What is the O'Neill government's view on tax holidays, and into the future, will the government be given tax holidays?
Oh, in Papua New Guinea is mining the sector as the best in terms of investment in the world. If you look at other regions within, other economies within the region, regional economies do not give such tax incentives to investors. In Papua New Guinea, we've given a lot of incentives to the mining industry as well as to the petroleum sector. We've given. And what I think is that it's fair that we do not continue to talk about tax holidays, but we also talk about a fair tax system, a fair taxation regime in the next medium term. But I'm also looking at other areas like a personal income tax. We've got to look at how we can better the personal income tax so that the Papua New Guinean can have a little bit more in the pockets for looking after the family and other commitments. You know, so the government will be looking at it in a more holistic approach to address those issues. But also the government will be flexible in very, very important areas, like for instance in tourism. Okay, if their companies are coming in to partner with Papua New Guinean local participants in business and entrepreneurs to establish a big impact tourism projects, the government will look at that to incentivize wherever it is necessary. So it's not a holistic no tax holiday, but it is talking about how best we can grow the economy through a fair taxation system. Wherever we can encourage investments, we do by what sort of incentives. But wherever we've given incentives already, let's not talk about any more incentives, but let's talk about how do we best make it fair and efficient for every party to enjoy and benefit from a taxation regime that is more conducive for everyone.
In terms of where the Sovereign Wealth Fund policy framework, institutional framework is, could you update our people on where things are regarding Sovereign Wealth Fund?
The Sovereign Wealth Fund is an important fund structured to achieve two things. One is to have a revolving fund that continues to inject into the Papua New Guinea's fiscal budget framework, annual budget framework, so you have that macroeconomic stability created for the country. So you've got a sustainable macroeconomic stability there because a fund is available to readily cushion any shock. Like for example, now I've got that 239.9 million kina budget deficit created because of the commodity prices downfall. What happens is I bring so much, the same amount of money, injecting in the budget process, so it cushions that downturn. This will be the kind of job that you will see this Wealth Fund do. The second part of the component of the fund will be to develop and address infrastructure. Those infrastructures that have deteriorated, whether it's been transportation, SOEs, or any other areas of development programs, the fund will be brought on board to addressing those more aggressively and more vehemently. So we improve the infrastructures in PNC. So this is the essence and the most important fundamental components or issues of the budget, of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So, and what will happen is the Sovereign Wealth Fund must be under a separate legislation. And with the Kumul Trust, the Prime Minister and I have discussed on this, because I as Treasurer am in charge of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and the Kumul Trust, the Prime Minister indicated to me, and we've discussed, it will be also under a separate legislation to look at that Kumul Trust structure. So that's the approach, and the submission on the Sovereign Wealth Fund is before Cabinet, and we'll address that in Cabinet soon to go before the September legislation.
One of the criticisms of government by some people is that now that you are running up so much debt, at the time when LNG revenues come in, we won't be having any money going to Sovereign Wealth Fund because we'd have to repay all our debts. What do you say about the criticism that's out there?
No, we're not running many debts. What you will see is in the 30-year period, it will be a 30 billion US dollars of tax revenue. And you'll see at the same time you'll have approximately 15 to 16 billion in terms of dividends paid to the state, and also landowners in there as well. So the debt that we have run into is only 2.5 billion or 2.6 billion. And now with that increment added to it because of the down to commodity prices, I'm seeing another 74 million or 78 million, like you heard me say, because the balance of the 239.9 million are offset by strong growth in the personal income tax as well as the GST tax. So the 78 million will belong to the 2.5 billion that we have. So total I will have is about 16.7 billion accumulated over time last 40 years of Papua New Guinea's existence as a nation. We will have built by 2017 a 18 billion kina debt, and that is manageable. Not just LNG project. Why are we talking about LNG project only? That's only one project. The government is not putting every egg in the same basket in LNG project. We're looking at developing the non-mining sector, and you've seen a strong growth in the non-mining sector already, and that's where we're going to support. So we'll be supporting the agriculture sector, we'll be supporting the education and skill development sectors. The SMEs must grow out of the agriculture and all the other small activities we do to give that impact. So we're diversifying the economy. So to Mr. Treasurer, I want to see, I want to have the people of Papua New Guinea think that the government is just saying, oh, we're only waiting for the LNG project proceeds. No. As Treasurer, I would like to assure the people of Papua New Guinea that I'm looking at the diversified, a broadened economy, and we have started to indicate that, illustrate that by the strong growth in the non-mining sector as compared to the mining sector. When the mining sector projects are going down, you see the non-mining sector are doing very, very well. So that's the way we have started, and that's the way we will continue to diversify and broaden the economic growth in Papua New Guinea. So I'd like to lay to rest that the government is not just banking on the LNG project alone. The government is banking on developing a strong, resilient economy based on broad scale, a diversified economy outside of the mining and petroleum sector. And in my budget report this morning, I've just indicated that there's a very strong growth in the non-mining sector of Papua New Guinea, and that will grow. That will continue under government program.
We'll be back with more when we return. To end tonight's show, here's Martin Namarong with the Resource News Update.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Resource News and Analysis. I'm Martin Namarong. There seems to be a rise in nationalism within Papua New Guinea. The resource sector, particularly mining, has not been spared. At a recent mining consultation held in Mount Agan, it was reported that the Vice Minister for Mining has stated that new legislative and policy changes are to be done in the national interest. But what is the national interest? According to the Governor of Angel Province, who was present at the consultation, government policies are being driven by the interests of foreign mining companies and investors. Governor Ipatas pointed out during the life of the Porgera mine that the landowners and provincial government have received only 3% of the total value of gold extracted from the mine. What is interesting about the Porgera situation though is that earlier this year the National Research Institute published an investigation into where money paid to local beneficiaries goes. The key finding was that there was gross lack of transparency about where the money goes. Now, turning to Bougainville, there seems to be a strange turn of events regarding the future of the Panguna mine, with President John Momis calling a recent agreement between local leaders and a Chinese multinational as being null and void. From a mineral policy and legal perspective, what is emerging from Bougainville is the confusion that arises when ownership rights on minerals are said to be retained by landowners. Is President Momis overruling the landowners? Is Momis implying that the autonomous Bougainville government owns the minerals, and the idea that Bougainvillean landowners own the minerals is merely legal fiction? There are interesting times ahead for Bougainville as Bougainville Copper Limited tries to gain entry. Momis has said that the Bougainville Copper Agreement governs the Panguna mine. The question remains as to whether Panguna landowners and the people of Bougainville recognize an agreement drawn up between the government of Papua New Guinea and Bougainville Copper in the 1960s, and whether the agreement will hold water should Bougainville gain independence. Elsewhere in the mining sector, it has been reported that Harmony Gold has changed its plans regarding the Wafi Gold Pool project and will be looking at a smaller project as gold and copper prices continue to be depressed. Newcrest has also received a ratings downgrade from the ratings agency Moody's, with the agency giving a negative outlook. On the LNG front, ExxonMobil has picked Scottish firm Woods Group to provide construction, engineering and maintenance services for Esso Highlands Limited's liquefied natural gas operations. The deal with Wood Group is estimated to be worth between 300 and 400 million British pounds over the next 5 years. About 500 jobs are expected to be created, 300 in Papua New Guinea and the remainder being overseas-based engineering jobs. Hydrocarbons exploration also continues to expand, with Oil Search and French oil giant Total drilling in the Gulf of Papua, and Horizon Energy exploring its Western Province tenements. In terms of economic figures related to the resources sector, prices of PNG's major export commodities have been falling this year. Gold has dropped by 13%, copper by 9% and oil by 5%. But despite this, it has been estimated that Australian shareholders have invested $19 billion in the PNG resource sector. Generally, economic growth in Papua New Guinea, as recently announced by the Treasurer, is said to be fueled by the construction sector linked to the LNG project and government stimulus spending in national infrastructure projects. And that's all we have time for this edition of Resource News. Thank you all for viewing. Good night.
That ends this edition of Resource PNG. If you have any comments or queries, do email us on this address, resourcepng@mtv.com.pg. Or to find out more, check MTV online, that's www.mtv.com.pg, and go to our Resource PNG page. Or you can check our page on Facebook. Until the same time next week, bye for now.